Vanessa James and Radford, who are two of the best figure skaters in the world. They're a pair. They pulled out of Canadian championships over the weekend because each of them had tested positive for COVID in December, and they lost a bunch of training and they just weren't able to perform the way they wanted to at national championships. But when Skating Canada announced the Olympic team that's headed to Beijing next month, guess who was on the team? James and Radford, and I'm not that deep into figure skating. My wife is. She watches the trials. I slept through them with the baby on the couch, but that's a big deal. Megan McPeak, if you were making the team, and maybe you should make the team next time, are James and Radford, who pulled out of, not trials, national championships, are they on your Olympic team?
I think it's a tough situation because how can you say that you can put yourself in a position to be ready for the Olympics if you weren't in a position to be ready for nationals? I feel like you should have to perform at nationals to be part of the national team going to the Olympics. And I don't think it's fair to the other pairs who weren't named to the team because they've taken a spot from them and did perform at nationals. So it's a tough situation to be in. It's kind of reminiscent of, on the US side, the speed skating, and one skater deciding that she's going to give her spot to the other because the other tripped and fell and didn't qualify. So I think it's a tough situation. And I think, in my opinion, if I can't perform at nationals, I shouldn't be able to perform at the Olympics. And I should remove myself from the team and allow a pair that performed at nationals and actually competed and tried to make the team, give them that spot. But again, it's easier for me to say that sitting here than being in that actual situation. But it's a no-win situation for them. If they go, people will, say that they shouldn't be going because they didn't compete. If they don't go, they don't get a chance at the Olympics, and maybe they don't qualify for the next one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as little as I follow figure skating, the times I'm made aware of it, it does amaze me how much this sport is like boxing, like as different as the two sports are in terms of like their substance. They both are highly political, highly subjective, and the person, you could sit there and watch a competition and know who won, only to find out the judges thought something different. And in this case, what's built into the Olympic qualification process are all kinds of loopholes. So the national championships are the de facto trials unless something unexpected happens, and then you can factor in overall performance, et cetera, which seems to be what happened with this one. Now, I do not have a dog in any figure skating fight, and so what it seems to be is that like these two are the best overall, and they happen not to have done well here because they caught COVID and couldn't train. And I guess the theory is, between now and Beijing, they'll have 3 straight weeks to get it all together, but we'll see. But Dave Zirin, like, what kind of signals are we sending, again, from the sports world to the rest of society about how to deal with COVID?
I've really wrestled over this particular case. And what I come back to is that if the sports world was serious about wrestling with COVID, then the Beijing Olympics wouldn't be happening in the first place. Like, this decision should have been made for the Canadian Olympic officials and the figure skating officials, just by the fact that we're not going to do these Olympics in the first place. But then there's this part of me that thinks like, okay, if we're just going on a straight toboggan ride to hell with all of this, and saying, because, to me, it's connected to this whole idea of saying, oh, well, now you only need 5 days and you can go back to work. It's like all these arbitrary new rules, which are basically just geared around keeping the trains running on time, and have nothing to do with public health. As long as we're going to live that life, then all the rules are out the window. This is just where I've landed on. And if the Canadian figure skating officials want this particular pair to be over there in Beijing, then so be it. And if anybody says, hey, that's not fair, that's an asterisk, that's not something that should be taking place, I would respond, well, none of this should be taking place.
Right.
And if all this is now bells and whistles and bread and circuses, then put the people out there and let's see what happens, and let's forget about life for a while, because the current setup is already so twisted that I don't see how you make a straight line out of this.
Yeah, and the big difference, Dave, between Tokyo and Beijing, right, is that Tokyo happened before Omicron. Uh, Tokyo also happened at a time when we, like as a society in North America and beyond, were taking this seriously and didn't want people with COVID mixing with people who didn't have COVID because we didn't want outbreaks, and we thought we could contain outbreaks and cared about containing outbreaks. The difference here being, this seems like to me a recipe for a lot of long quarantines post games and a lot of headaches, right? Because you have Omicron, and Omicron is very shifty. Omicron gets around tests and it pops up and it runs through your whole roster like it did, it runs through your whole tournament like it did at the World Junior Hockey Championship. And so now, unlike Tokyo, we have Omicron that is going to come to Beijing with at least one athlete, and it's going to leave Beijing with a bunch of athletes, except that you get 10 people test positive at Beijing. That's 10 people that have to stay in China like a minimum 3 weeks after the games. And so like, what is this going to look like for the second half of these seasons, your bobsled season, figure skating season, whatever it is? These men and women compete through February into March, into, early spring. But you run, it's a coin toss now as to whether or not like your biggest stars are going to get through the Olympics without a positive test. And if they test positive at the Olympics, you can, cross out the whole next month of their lives because they're just going to be in the hotel. Megan McPeak.
The other thing too, keep in mind, like the issue with this situation, to Dave's point is, and to what you were just saying is, let's say, because we know it's going to happen, there's going to be an athlete from some country that tests positive. As you mentioned, they have to quarantine for up to 3 weeks because that's been the policy there. The issue that a lot of people seem to forget, or they either forget or they choose to not even acknowledge, is you can continue to test positive even after you're no longer infectious for weeks. So you're no longer infectious. You've quarantined for 3 weeks. Let's say you continue to test positive, you could potentially be stuck in Beijing for 2 months, 3 months, who knows? Because the most minimal amount of virus in your system can be detected by these tests, and it will keep you in quarantine. And it's a crappy situation.
Yeah, you're not in Beijing for 3 weeks as a tourist, right? You're there.
No, you're stuck in a hotel room. I've been there. It sucks. Not Beijing. I've been stuck in a hotel room for 2 weeks. It is a disaster. Yeah, well, this is today's point. What we're asking for. This is what we've decided we wanted when we, around the world, lower the standards regarding how long you should take yourself out of action, sports or like a real life job, before you go back in. Are you testing negative? It doesn't matter. Are you you're not asymptomatic, but your symptoms are abating? Cool. Go back to work. I'm sure nothing bad can happen. Omicron is milder, right? I don't know, but we will see. And I don't know. Fingers crossed. If I had the dexterity on my feet, I'd cross my toes too, but I don't have a great deal of optimism